Welcome to Field of Screams podcast. Today we'll be talking about Paranormal Activity 3. The very first time I actually watched this film, I had a pretty traumatic experience. I'm going to talk about it at the end, so stay tuned at the end of the review to hear about that. But let's go ahead and jump into the film itself. So we had Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity 2 was a prequel, and Paranormal Activity 3 is a prequel to a prequel, which on paper it sounds like it would be a pretty terrible movie, but they actually executed this movie very well. On opening night, me and my friends, we were a bunch of Paranormal Activity nerds. We looked forward to these movies every time they came out. And I took my girlfriend at the time. We went and saw this movie and met up with a bunch of friends. And while we were watching, when this one opens up, because we're like, oh, I wonder, how this is all going to start and continue after Paranormal Activity 2, with Katie, killing Christy and walking out with the baby. Like, will they be in it at all? And then it opens up with Katie and Christy with just another shot of them, painting and getting Hunter's room ready to go. I just remember all kind of like, yeah, like they're back. And then it shows Katie bringing this box of VHS tapes. And Christy's like, oh, well, what are those? And she goes, oh, I got this from Grandma. I don't even know what they are, really. I haven't really even looked into them. And it's kind of like, oh, okay, a mysterious box of VHS tapes you're just bringing over to Christy's house. Like, whatever. But there was a break-in in Paranormal Activity 2. And during that movie, when that break-in happened, I think they talked about a necklace of some sort that was stolen. They're like, that's the only thing that was stolen. But this movie kind of retcons that, and they're like, oh, those VHS tapes, those were taken too. And the reason why they inserted it in is so that we have a way to look back in the past, back when Katie and Christy were kids, and that's where this movie starts. So this movie officially starts at a birthday party. We see Katie and Christy as two little girls. We get Julie, who is their mom. We get Dennis, who is the mom's boyfriend. Pretty much the dad figure in this film. And at the birthday party, it's kind of funny, and I don't know if it's foreshadowing, but there is a part to where Katie is like hitting this pinata, and the pinata falls to the ground, and Katie just keeps hitting it. And Dennis is like, okay, but she just keeps bashing this pinata in. And he's like, oh my gosh, you're a little monster. And I don't know, I just feel like it's nice little foreshadowing to what she's going to grow into when she gets older. I don't know, it made me laugh a little bit. We do see, as this gets going, that picture that was in the very first Paranormal Activity when they go into the attic. And she's like, oh my gosh, I took this when I was little. And then we see in Paranormal Activity 2, they use that picture to kind of burn the corners to transfer the curse or the possession back to Katie. That's where this picture takes place. It's literally just Katie dressed up, and her mom's like, hey, let me get a picture. And it's as simple as that. It's like, oh, okay, like I thought there would be more lore to the picture, but at least we know where and how that was taken. So after the birthday party, we get a video of Julie and Dennis. They are back home. The girls are asleep. They're in the bedroom. They are smoking weed. Both of them are pretty high. And Dennis throws out, hey, why don't we have sex on tape? And this kind of breaks ground on the franchise because Mika tries it in the first one, gets shut down. In the second one, it's kind of flirted around, but it never happens. But this one, they actually do mess around on tape. So, we do get the video of Julie straddling Dennis. But while that's happening, an earthquake breaks out. And I've always wondered, is this supposed to be a natural earthquake, or is this a demon-type earthquake? You never really get an answer, but what you do get an answer to is, while things start to rumble and stuff, because you do hear some sounds at first, and Dennis is like, I'm sure it's nothing. He's just trying to make it continue. But then, everything starts to shake. So they both get up. They're like, oh, we gotta protect the girls. And while everything's shaking due to the earthquake, some dust falls from the ceiling. And it kind of falls on, there's just a little space where nothing's there. But the dust, hits something. Like something invisible was sitting there. So I guess the demon was watching Dennis and Julie, and then it was all aggravated due to the earthquake. So I'm going to say it was natural. I'm going to say the demon was watching them. Then the earthquake happened, and the demon got all frustrated, and that's why all these events started taking place. When the dust falls on the demon, notices it. He videos weddings. That's his job. So he's got recordings all over the place, and his job entails just breaking down tape and looking at footage. And when he sees it, he has to show one of his coworkers. His name is Randy. Randy is, I don't want to call him a doofus, but he's kind of goofy. He's kind of a comedic aspect to this film. But when he's first showing him, he's like, hey man, I want you to watch something. And when he pulls it up, it's him on the bed with like Julia on top of him. He goes, whoa, what's going on? Did you record this? And he's like, yeah man, just watch. And like Dennis is trying to be all like serious about it, but Randy's just like, dude, I can't believe you guys record yourselves? But then eventually he does show him like, the demon, and Randy's like, dude, you gotta record everything. And then we get the reason as to why Dennis is recording in this film. Because he has lots of video cameras. I guess he has a lot of tapes. And his idea is he's going to record around the house to see if he notices anything off. And he starts noticing things right away. One of the things he notices is that Christy is a complete weirdo of a kid. So both the girls, Katie and Christy, they are very young. Katie's a little older. Katie acts pretty straightforward for a kid in this movie, while Christy, while he's recording, she will like sit off in the corner. She'll be whispering to someone who's not there. She'll be giggling like something's really funny. And even at nighttime, like you see her just kind of strolling through the house, talking to something that's not there. It'll be about 1 or 2 in the morning, and then like the camera will pan, and Christy will be like standing on top of a table, giggling, looking at something. So Dennis decides to like get to the bottom of it. He's like, I'm going to talk to Christy. And by the way this house is set up, these girls in their so-called room, it's such an odd room that they stay in. So on the second floor, when you go up the stairs, as soon as that stairs ends, there's almost like a living room in the upstairs, and that's the girls' bedroom. There's like no walls, there's no doors, it's just kind of out in the open, which is cool because the girls have a gigantic room, I guess you could say. But again, there's like no doors, there is a bathroom connected to it. But I just feel like it's a really bad place to put a kid, like there's like really high ledges that are around this area. Of course, there's a stairway that's like right by their beds. I don't know. It's just a very weird place to put a room. But I mean, that's where their room is. But attached to this room is this little room, mini room, a cupboard, if that's what it's called. We'll just call it a mini room, right? So there's this mini room where Christy like always walks over and she talks. She talks to someone. So Dennis is like, I need to confront Christy about this. So when he goes up and talks to her, he's like, hey, who are you talking to? And she goes, oh, his name's Toby. And he thinks it's her imaginary friend, which Katie often teases Christy about. She goes, why do you have imaginary friends? Like, big kids don't have imaginary friends, and kind of puts down the idea. But the name Toby, it's such a weird name that they would call the demon that. As much as I love these movies, whenever I talk to it about other people, like usually people snicker about the name of the demon being Toby, because I mean The Office was big during this time, and usually when people think of Toby, they think of Toby Flenderson from The Office. So you just picture like, what if Toby from The Office was invisible? He's the one doing hauntings in this house. I don't know. It's just kind of goofy. But anyways. He starts asking her, and he goes, oh, tell me about Toby. And she says that he is very old, like Grandma. He's tall, real tall. Don't call him fat, which makes you wonder if the demon's just very self-conscious, like, please don't call me fat. He's hairy. Now she's describing it, it is very creepy. And I feel like there is something creepy about little kids describing like an imaginary friend or something they're imagining. I remember I had like a little niece who had an imaginary friend, and when my aunt says, oh, like, what's he look like? And she said, oh, he's hairy and has really sharp teeth. And I remember just as like a kid that was 12, like it creeped me out. I was like, oh, like, nope, don't want to deal with that. And that's what this movie, it reminded me of that situation back then. So in this movie, we kind of have a reversal of the dynamic that happens in the first two movies. In this movie, we have a believer and the guy in the relationship, and then Julie is the one who kind of puts down the idea. He tells her like, "Hey, Christy's like talking to a guy named Toby who's imaginary," and then Julie's just like, "Well, that's what kids do. Kids are weird." Which I think is a complete rational way to take it. You look at Paranormal Activity 2, that dad, he went kind of above and beyond to just not believe anything that happened. And Julie's not like that. Like, once things start hitting the fan, because, like, once it hits the fan too fast. And, there's really no room for her to be irrational about it. And she's not like Mika, who's, like, trying to torture a demon to, like, come out. So it's nice to not have to really deal with those two sides of the coin. This one, you get a little bit from Julie, and then like it kind of moves on. Dennis doesn't want to tell her about the little things that happened beforehand because he's like, well, she'll make me stop recording. And he's very obsessed with that. We do get a scene where Julie is talking to her mom, which is Katie and Christy's grandma. Which, by the way, this isn't the first time we see her in the movie. There is a clip of her talking at the birthday party. I didn't think anything of it the very first time I watched this film, every time the grandma popped up on the screen. But if you know where the movie's going, they definitely leave hints of, the grandma is up to something sinister. She's talking to Julie, and she's like, "Oh, where's Dennis?" And she's like, "Oh, Dennis is out buying videotapes. He ran out." Because, if you're recording way back then, it's not like now. You have to go buy videotapes. And I guess Dennis isn't erasing tapes that have nothing on them. I guess he's just like hoarding them. So he just keeps buying and buying. And, the grandma freaks out a little bit. She goes, "What? Like, you using your card?" And she's like, "Oh, it's fine. Like, we're fine." And she's like, No. Like, he's using your money. And she like starts complaining about Dennis. And then she goes, "Well, are you going to have more kids?" And Julie's like, "No, I'm not." And then the grandma's like, "You always wanted a big family." And she's just guilting her. And then she even comes out and says, "You always wanted a son, too." And, if you watch Paranormal Activity 2, they kind of hint that the cults or the covens, when they make a deal with the devil or the demon's always going to want the first born son in the family. So, when the grandma starts harping on the son aspect, it's kind of like, okay, like that's a huge clue they put in there. If they would have left it subtle at like, you always wanted a bigger family, I think that could have been a pretty incognito hint. Because, I think it's a pretty normal thing with families. Like, people are always kind of pestering, like, new couples that just get married, or maybe they have one kid and they're like, "Oh, when are you going to have another? When are you going to have another?" And people are very nosy about that aspect. Like, it's kind of crazy. So, if they just would have kept that in the movie, I think that could have been just a very well hidden hint that the grandma wants a son. But she literally comes out and says, "You always wanted a son." As far as the scares go, it starts kind of slow with Christy just walking around at night, talking to a mysterious figure. And then it becomes at one point to where she goes to a very high ledge from the second floor, and you hear her talking. She goes, "Are you sure? Do you promise you'll catch me?" And she literally jumps from the highest ledge, which, if Dennis caught that would have been definite proof that something's going on. But that never really comes up later. There is a part to where Katie keeps teasing Christy about having an imaginary friend. She goes, "Why do you go up to the mini room and talk to him?" And she goes, "That's where he stays." So Katie goes in there. The door slams, it locks. Katie can't get out. She's like screaming. And Christy's like, "It's not me. It's not me. I can't let you out." And then eventually the door does open up, and Dennis or Julie go up there and they're like, "What's going on?" And Katie blames Christy, and then like, would you two just stop? And then they leave. But then we get to where Dennis puts a camera on a fan to where like it rotates. And that's kind of the next evolutionary way they film things in this franchise. It's a lot better than the security cameras they had in Paranormal Activity 2. There's a lot of suspense as the camera's rotating. You get a nice little scare to where Julie is in the kitchen, and there's like a little garbage disposal thing in the sink to where it grinds stuff up. Julie loses something down in there, and like her hand goes in, and then a light drops, and it makes you jump a bit. There's even just a few fake out jump scares. Like Julie scares Dennis at one point. She like puts on a mask and jumps out of the closet, and it is way too effective of a jump scare. It really is. This movie brings Bloody Mary into play, which is kind of a random thing to bring in, but it does make it a little effective. Randy's walking around near the girls, and he just brings them up. He's like, "Hey, girls ever play Bloody Mary?" And Katie's like, "What's that?" And Dennis goes, "Dude, would you stop?" And he's like, "What? No, I mean, like, it's pretty scary if you do it." Like, and he explains how. So the girls end up doing that later in the movie. And then it comes back later with Randy. But right after that moment, that's when the babysitter comes. Dennis and Julie, they gotta like go somewhere. There's a young girl who's gonna babysit Katie and Christy. They go to bed, and the babysitter's just kind of doing her thing. But before they go to bed, they're like, "Can you tell us a ghost story?" And she's in the room. She tells something scary, and she puts a little sheet over her head, and she's like, "Ooh!" And then like while she's doing that, she goes, I'm a ghost, Dennis." And just kind of laughs it off. And then later on in the scene, she was doing something. The fan's like rotating with the camera. And then like she does like a little jump scare where she like pops out of the camera, and she's like, "Gotcha, Dennis." And it's kind of like, man, she's trying to get Dennis's attention. But instead she gets the demon's attention. Because like it's a really, really good scare to where she's sitting in the kitchen, the camera's panning back and forth, and then you notice just a sheet, the same sheet she was using with the girls. It's kind of like standing by the stairs, and then when it rotates over and goes back, there's nothing there. Then when it comes back, literally, there's someone standing right behind her with the sheet over its head. But I swear, because Christy said the demon's really tall. But then when you see this thing with the sheet, it looks about 3 or 4 feet tall. Like, it literally looks like a little kid. Then the sheet drops. So, like, obviously it's not a kid underneath the sheet. She then goes upstairs to see if Katie and Christy are okay. And she hears something coming from the mini room. So she goes up to the door, and then like literally something just kind of like jumps out at her. Like you can tell she feels something. And she runs downstairs like she's a little frazzled. Dennis and Julie get home. She just wants to get the heck out of there. And then Dennis looks it up on the video cameras, and he's like, "Man, what happened? What do I have here?" So he starts showing like Randy this. Randy's getting more excited too. After the babysitter scene, things start getting more intense. Dennis notices like a symbol in the mini room up on the wall. Christy's talking more and more to Toby, and you start getting, just by the gist of her conversations with nothing, that something is trying to talk her into doing something she doesn't want to do. And it comes to a part to where Christy goes, "No, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm not going to do that." And then once that happens, things ramp up even more. So Christy gets really sick at one point. Dennis and Julie, they have to run her to the hospital. So Dennis calls up Randy because he doesn't have a babysitter anymore. That girl doesn't want to come over anymore. Don't blame her. Randy comes over, and Katie, she's like, "Oh, let's go play Bloody Mary. Like you talked about it. Let's play it." And Randy's like, "Oh, I don't know." And he even looks at the camera and goes, "Sorry, Dennis. Like, we're going to go play." And at first he like tries joking around. He's like, "All right, let's do it." And he like flips on the light, and Katie goes, "No, you got to do it right." So then they like say Bloody Mary 3 times. And once they do, they start hearing all this stuff, and it scratches Randy on his stomach, like very deep cut. And you can tell Randy's just freaking out. And it's a really good scene because he opens up the door, and like the ghost like threw stuff across the room. You really feel for Randy because it's like, what do you do in that situation? Katie's crying, and he's doing his best to calm her down, but he's about to freak out himself. And once Dennis shows back up, like Randy's like, "Listen, I'm done. Like, I'm not doing any more video stuff. Like, this is too much for me." And Randy's now out of the picture. The next big scene, Katie's chasing Christy around the house. They go upstairs to the room. And while Katie's chasing Christy, she runs into like some unseen figure. And it's a really well done scene. Like, as soon as she hits him, I remember watching it in theater, and as soon as she just kind of smacked into something that wasn't there, you just heard like literally every person in the theater was like, "Oh." And then like it cuts back to Dennis and Julie. They're arguing about something. And then when it cuts back, Toby's literally lifting Katie up by her hair. Yeah, Toby just doesn't care by this point. Even after all that, Christy's still trying to be defiant and not talk to Toby. But Toby comes one night and makes things go haywire in the room, makes the symbol pop up on the little laptop that's sitting in the room, and then he literally like drags Katie into the mini room and like keeps her in there. She's screaming, and Christy finally goes, "All right, fine, I'll do it." And you're kind of just wondering, like, what is she talking about? What's she gonna do? And then finally one night, and I mean, like I'm hitting the big stuff here. There's a lot of little small moments that are still creepy. Like, Christy just peering in her parents' doorway and just staring at them. They do the little speed up trick, like they did in the first one. They add that in there. But eventually, Christy goes to her mom, Julie, and she goes, "Listen, I want to go to Grandma's." And the first time I watched this, I was so dumb. I was like, "That's a good idea, Christy." I didn't realize she was being manipulated. I was being too caught up and everything going on. But Julie's like, "No, we're not going to Grandma's. Like, we're fine." And Toby's like, "Okay, like we're gonna play that game." So Julie's like in the kitchen doing stuff. She walks over because she hears something. Nothing's there. She walks back to the kitchen, and literally everything on the ground is now gone. And she's like, "Oh, where did it all go?" And all of a sudden it falls from the ceiling. It kind of reminded me of the scene in Paranormal Activity 2 where all the cabinets fly open at the same time. It's just a ginormous boom. That's how this one was, but everything falls from the ceiling, the table, like pots, pans, everything. And Julie freaks out and she goes, "Okay, we're going to Grandma's house." Now again, me when I first watched this, when they go to the Grandma's, I was like, man, that's so smart. Like, finally the first people that get out of the house. Like, maybe this will help. I was so naive back then with scary movies. I really was. So, they're going to the Grandma's house, and the Grandma's house is beyond creepy. It is a typical grandparents' house, but man, like, there's just something extra in this one. And while they're there, they're trying to get comfortable. Christy's looking at this painting, and Dennis is like, "Why is Christy being so weird?" Like, doesn't really question it. The grandma takes the two girls to the rooms, like, starts dressing them up. And Julie's like, "Oh, what are you guys doing?" And the grandma's like, "Oh, they're dressing up like wives," or something like that, or the girls say it. And she goes, "Oh, who are you getting married to?" And Christy goes, "Toby." And Dennis is like, "What?" And Julie like shuts it down. She goes, "No, we're done. We're all going to bed." And it kind of like fast forwards to bedtime. And then like while they're going to bed, they eventually like wake up. And Dennis is like, "Hey, I think I heard cars. Like, what's going on? I'm hearing noises." And Julie's like, she gets up in the middle of the night. Like, I'll go check on her. She's like, she's being so loud. And she like goes off. And Dennis, I think he like, I don't know if he falls back asleep or what. I think he does. But eventually he's like, "Oh, like, Julie hasn't came back. That's weird." So he wakes up and, he still has the camera rolling. And man, like, I forgot all about it. But while he gets up, I believe it's the grandma. She's in the very back of the room, like just hiding in the shadows, standing there. It is so creepy to look at. They did a great job with it. And like this house, like at night, while he's walking through it is scary. This is the climax of the movie by far. It doesn't chicken out by any means. Like it is legit creepy in the grandma's house. So, he starts like walking around, Dennis does. Eventually he comes upon Katie. He pulls her into like a closet. He's like trying to hide. And he's like trying to figure out like what's going on. Eventually he walks out of there, and then he sees Julie like on the stairs, and he walks up to her, and she's legitimately floating off the ground, and she's already dead by this point. But Toby throws her dead body at Dennis and like knocks him over. And he gets up, he's freaking out, he's telling Katie like, "Stay there." And he's like looking around, and I think he comes across Christy at some point. And he's like trying to tell the girls, but everything's just going like crazy. No, I think he loses track of both of them. He goes down like this like little hallway and goes to like the garage. And when he opens up the garage, there's these old people. And that's when it's like the big plot reveal that it's a cult. And he's kind of like, "Oh." and like they just like slowly look at him and start walking in his direction. So he takes off running again, and like the little girls are being weird. He sees either Christy or Katie, I think it's Katie, by the stairway, and it looks like she's looking at her dead mom. That's why like it's very conveniently like set up, because at first I was like, why would Katie just be sitting there like that and not moving? But then I look, and she's placed to where she's looking in the direction of Julie. So in Dennis's head, he's probably like, oh, she's looking at her dead mom. She's in shock. So like he like goes up to her, and when she turns, her eyes are all black. She's like possessed and like knocks him over. And then you see like the grandma kind of like strutting around the house, and Toby comes and like breaks Dennis in half. He doesn't snap him in half, but like breaks his back and kills him like instantly. Pretty gnarly kill. And then you see the two girls like go with the grandma, and then the movie just kind of wraps up from there. It's a really dark ending, and it honestly reminds me of my friend. His grandma was like going to Vegas. He had a grandma he never talked to. And he was like, dude, like we could go to my grandma's house. Like she gave me the keys to her house. No one's going to be home. Like we could get drinks. And I was like, cool. And so we go there during the day. And like this house is like an old Victorian house, like out in the middle of nowhere. Like we drove like 25 minutes to go there. We're there, like things like look kind of oldish. Like it sounds mean saying that. But we go downstairs. There's a pool table. We play pool. And like while we're playing pool, the downstairs light like kind of like flickers. It's like the cliche horror movie thing, and the light like goes out, and we're like, oh, that's weird. But we start doing other things around the house, and like while he's doing something, he hears something in another bedroom. He goes to like investigate it. We find nothing, and we're like, yeah, we're gonna come back later. We're gonna party. We'll watch scary movies. So we leave. And then, like, we head back later that night. The sun's going down, and we drive all the way out to his grandma's. And we pull into the long driveway. We're out in the middle of nowhere. And, like, we just kind of sit in the car, and, like, none of us really, like, say anything. And literally, this is, like, a couple months after this movie. And, like, we're both just sitting in the car, like, looking forward. And I was like, man, it looks a lot creepier at night, doesn't it? And he goes, yeah, it does. And I said, you know her pretty good, though, right? And he's like, not really. I'm like, how do you not know your grandma? And he's like, I don't know, I just don't talk to her a lot. I was like, okay. Like, you got like defensive. And then he's like, dude, what if she's like in a cult, like Paranormal Activity 3? And I remember just looking over, I'm like, why would you say that? And like, literally, we both got spooked out. We didn't even like go there that night. We ended up turning around and we went back home to whoever's house. But yeah, like the movie influenced us that much. But that's not the traumatic story I promised in the beginning. So when I went to see this opening night, like we met a bunch of friends there, had a good time. I thought this movie was absolutely terrifying. Like it terrified me. The whole twist with the cult, that shocked me. I was like, oh my God. Like I wasn't screaming. But like it was one of those, like it scares you deep down. So me and my girlfriend were heading home, and we're just talking while I'm driving. And then, like, while I'm driving, like, I just hit something, like, just a big bump, and I was like, what was that? And, like, I kind of, like, slowed down a little bit, but I was going, like, 60 or 70. I'm on the highway. And, like, while I'm trying to, like, slow down, like, my tire just starts, like, being weird. And, like, what it was is I hit something, and, like, my tire went out. And, like, I didn't really know what to do, so I tried slowing down. And the back end of my car spun out. And my car shot off the other side of the highway into a ditch and rolled. I don't know how many times it rolled, because I blacked out whenever I crashed. But whenever I came to, like everything's back to normal, my car was now in a cornfield, and while I crashed and tumbled, how like in movies when it happens, it isn't realistic enough to where like things in the car get thrown around like crazy, like change and all that gets thrown into the back seat. But another thing, we went through some restaurant, and we both got high C drinks. So like when I came to after I blacked out, I awake to red liquid running down my head and my hands, and my girlfriend screaming at the top of her lungs because it terrified her. And she screamed for a very long time, and I calmed her down. But, my first thought when I came to with her screaming was the high C was blood. And I'm wondering, whose blood am I covered in, mine or hers? And she's screaming, is she dying? Like, it legitimately freaked me out. And then I'm just sitting alone in a cornfield. The car behind me, like after I spun off and lost control and like rolled, they literally kept driving. Like I guess, because I know there was one car there. But luckily, a car not too far behind, they pulled up and they checked to see if we were okay. They called 911, and we were taken care of. But it, like, literally it gave me anxiety for driving for a very long time. Like, it was a pretty scary night. And I don't know, like, when I think of this movie, it always reminds me of that night. Like, it wasn't like, man, I can't even watch it because I crashed. But it's like the correlation of, like, the two very scary things. Like, one, I was terrified by the film. But two, we almost died. I'm a lot better now. It's not like I'm like, oh, it still haunts me. Like, this was kind of a while ago. But it is just something that just always comes to mind with this movie. Now, to kind of rewind it back just for a little bit, because overall summary points. I talked about how scary this movie it is. It does bring the scares. It is very effective. It brings new ways to film the scares in this franchise, which is a very good thing. It's got great characters. All the characters are likable. The only thing I kind of think of, because like it does kind of adjust the lore, and it tells like that there is a cult, and that's why the things in number 1 and number 2 happen. But one thing I've always wondered is, how do Katie and Christy not remember all of these events that went down in number 3? And the only thing I can kind of think of was, maybe the cult or coven, they cast some spell or did some brainwashing to make them forget the events. Because I think they even say in the first or second one, they said they just remember there's a lot of bad things, they don't remember the details of them. So that could solve the answers to that. Now in this third one, the demon does hover around Christy a lot more. And like it is kind of weird because number 1 starts with Katie. Number 2 says it then starts with Christy and then it goes to Katie. And then number 3, like the demon specifically talking to Christy. And it does make you wonder why. And I guess you could say like, well, the demon knew that Christy was going to have the first newborn son. But if the demon knew eventually that Christy was going to bounce the curse and, it would go to Katie, wouldn't the demon talk to Katie as well? Maybe the demon did talk to Katie when she was at a really young age, and then she just kind of grew out of it. So then he had to talk to Christy because she was now the youngest one. That's where he actually executed his plan, and it worked. And, the cult got rid of Julie because she doesn't want to have any more kids. And the demon knew that Christy was going to have the son. So, I don't know. It's a lot of lore to break down and go through. I think it all kind of makes sense if you reason it out. But overall, I think it's a very solid movie. And it makes all 3 of these that we have went over so far, they do connect very, very well. And I think that's an awesome thing for something that started off as an indie film. And it spawned 2 more sequels to where like it all connects and it all does not feel disjointed. Like it feels like it fits in very well together. So it's a very impressive feat on its own for the franchise. Overall, it's a very good movie, though. I enjoy this one a lot. I say that a lot, so I won't say it anymore. So this has been my review for Paranormal Activity 3. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. If you agree with me on it, tell me why in the comments. If you could give the episode a like, it gets it out to other people. And thank you so much for listening. We're going to cover the 4th one next, so until next time.